Chapter 1. The Unlucky Transmigration. The last thing Su Qing remembered was the taste of cheap instant coffee and the sound of 23-year-olds screaming at the top of their lungs during a fire drill that turned out to be a false alarm. He had been a kindergarten teacher for 8 years. 8 years of juice boxes, playground scrapes, and explaining with a straight face why we don't eat glue. 8 years of patience so profound it should have been classified as a superpower. And it ended with him face down on the classroom floor, his heart simply deciding it had had enough. He expected darkness, or maybe a tunnel of light. Perhaps his Aunt May, who had passed 5 years ago, would be there to greet him with her famous braised pork. He did not expect to wake up in a sterile white room that smelled of antiseptic and something vaguely floral, with a man who looked like he could bench press a tank glaring at him like he was something stuck to the bottom of his boot. "The doctors say you'll recover," the man said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of the bed. "A pity." Su Qing blinked. The man was tall, impossibly tall. He wore a severe black military uniform decorated with more medals than a small country's entire army, and his dark hair was cropped short against his scalp. His face was all sharp angles and hard planes, like a mountain carved by glaciers, and his eyes, cold, gray, and utterly devoid of warmth, were fixed on Su Qing with an expression of pure contempt. Before Su Qing could formulate a response, a blue translucent screen materialized in front of his face, making him flinch. System notification. "Welcome, Transmigrator. You have been inserted into the novel Starbound Love. The Marshal's Redemption," as the character Su Qing, the vicious mother male Omega. Original character Fate. Executed for treason and child neglect after abusing the Marshal's twin alpha children. Your mission: survive. No pressure. Good luck. You'll need it. The screen flickered and vanished. Su Qing stared at the empty space where it had been, his mind reeling. Transmigrated? Into a novel? An ABO novel? He'd read a few of those during his rare moments of downtime, usually scoffing at the melodrama and the frankly concerning lack of communication skills between the main characters. And now he was in one, as a villain destined for execution. He looked back at the man, the Marshal, he presumed, who was now speaking to someone else in the room. "And ensure the children are kept away from him. I won't have them subjected to any more of his influence." From behind the Marshal's imposing legs, two small faces peered out at Su Qing. A boy and a girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old. They were beautiful children, with the same dark hair as the Marshal and his piercing gray eyes. But there was nothing soft or childlike about their expressions. They glared at Su Qing with open hostility, their little hands clutching toy swords. Actual toy swords, made of some kind of lightweight metal, raised as if ready to charge. The girl, slightly bolder, let out a low, guttural growl. The boy followed suit, his lip curling back to reveal tiny, but still somehow threatening, canine teeth. Feral. That was the only word for it. These children were absolutely feral. The Marshal, the terrifying Alpha War hero, the man who could probably destroy planets with his glare, was currently being used as a human shield by 2 tiny, growling gremlins. The original Su Qing, the vicious mother, had clearly done a number on them. They were defensive, aggressive, and looked about 30 seconds away from a full-blown tantrum. But Su Qing wasn't seeing a dangerous Alpha War hero in his troubled spawn. He was seeing a frazzled, single-parent household in desperate need of routine, structure, and possibly a nap. The Marshal's cold glare? He'd seen that look 100 times from parents at pickup time who were running late and taking it out on him. The children's growling? A classic bid for attention, a defense mechanism born of insecurity. The toy swords? Inappropriate outlet for big feelings. The whole scene was a case study in what not to do from his early childhood education courses. A strange sense of calm settled over Su Qing. The panic of transmigration, the fear of execution, the terror of the glaring alpha, it all faded, replaced by the cool, professional focus of a man who had successfully mediated disputes over a single red crayon. He ignored Feng Hao entirely. He looked directly at the children. "I'm Su Qing," he said, his voice gentle but firm, the same voice he used to calm tantrums and negotiate sharing. I'm going to be staying here. I see you have swords. That's very interesting. Do they have names? The growling stopped. The twins exchanged a bewildered glance. No one had ever asked about their swords before. The girl, Feng Ling, tightened her grip. This is Thunderfang, she said, her voice rusty, as if she wasn't used to using it for conversation. And mine is Skull Crusher, the boy, Feng Jie, added, puffing out his small chest. Thunderfang and Skull Crusher, Su Qing repeated, nodding seriously. Those are excellent, powerful names. They look very well cared for. You must be good sword owners. The twins stared at him, completely disarmed. They didn't know what to do with praise. It was an alien concept. Feng Hao, however, was not disarmed. His eyes narrowed further, if that was possible. What game are you playing? He demanded, his voice a low threat. Su Qing finally looked at him. He didn't cower. He didn't flinch. He simply met the marshal's gaze with the calm, slightly tired expression of a man who has seen it all. I'm not playing any game, Marshal, he said. I'm just talking to my family. He said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, that for a moment, even Feng Hao was speechless. The doctor chose that moment to re-enter the room, chattering about discharge papers and follow-up appointments. The tension broke. Feng Hao turned sharply on his heel, one large hand on each twin's shoulder, and marched them out of the room without another word. But as they left, Feng Ling looked back over her shoulder. She wasn't glaring this time. She just looked confused. Su Qing lay back on the pillow, staring at the ceiling. He had a marshal who won and gone, two traumatized alpha children who viewed him as the enemy, and an execution date looming in his future if the plot ran its course. He also had 8 years of experience wrangling tiny humans, a deep-seated belief in the power of a good routine, and a sudden, burning determination to not die. He smiled to himself, a small, dangerous smile. All right, household, he murmured. Time for a parent-teacher conference. Chapter 2. Operation, Household Management. Being discharged from the hospital was an exercise in awkward silence. Feng Hao had sent a car, but not himself. The vehicle was sleek, black, and drove itself through skies filled with hovering transports and between towering spires of gleaming metal and glass. Su Qing pressed his face to the window like a child on a field trip, trying to reconcile the interstellar city outside with the life he'd left behind. It was beautiful, impossibly advanced, and utterly alien. The car deposited him at the entrance of a vast, imposing estate. The Feng family manor, his system notifications helpfully supplied. It was less a house and more a fortress, all dark stone and sharp angles, surrounded by meticulously manicured gardens that somehow still looked hostile. Inside, it was worse. The foyer was grand, with high ceilings and cold, polished floors. But it was also a disaster zone. A small, muddy boot lay on its side by the door. A half-eaten protein bar was stuck to an expensive-looking vase. In the living room, toys were scattered everywhere, not just on the floor, but in the furniture, as if they'd been thrown with violent intent. A blanket fort or possibly a war bunker dominated one corner, constructed from cushions and what looked like a genuine military-grade tactical blanket. The household staff, a small army of people in neat uniforms, hovered at the edges, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The head butler, a stoic man named Zhang Wei who looked like he'd seen things, stepped forward. "Master Su," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "The marshal instructed that you be given the East Wing guest quarters. The children's schedule is flexible. Their meals are prepared on demand. Is there anything you require?" Flexible schedule. Meals on demand. Su Qing's eye twitched. "No," he said, shaking his head. He looked around at the chaos again. "But I'm going to require a few things. A large whiteboard, if you have one. Markers, different colors. A calendar. And a list of everyone who works in this house." Zhang Wei blinked. "A whiteboard, Master Su." For the chore chart, Su Qing explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And please, just call me Su Qing. Master makes me feel like I should be wearing a robe and dispensing wisdom." For the next 3 days, Su Qing worked. He ignored the twins, who watched him from doorways with suspicious eyes, their toy swords always at the ready. He ignored the occasional cold messages from Feng Hao, which were really just terse reminders of their impending divorce, delivered via a hovering drone that projected the marshal's stern face into the air. He ignored the whispering staff, who clearly thought he'd lost his mind. He cleaned. He organized. He categorized. He discovered a supply closet filled with enough cleaning supplies to sanitize a small moon and put them to good use. He found the kitchen and was relieved to discover that, despite the futuristic setting, vegetables still existed. He found the twins' playroom and, with a heavy heart, began the process of sorting through the chaos. Broken toys went in one pile. Potential weapons, most of them, went in another. Things that could be salvaged went in a third. On the third day, he unveiled his masterpiece. In the main living area, directly across from the war bunker blanket fort, he had mounted a large whiteboard. On it, in neat, colorful columns, was a chart. Feng family chore chart. Beside the chart, he had posted a large, printed list. The calm down corner rules. It's okay to be angry or sad. It's not okay to hit, kick, or yell at others that go to the corner. Breathe. Count to 10 or 20. When you're calm, we can talk. He had designated a specific cushioned window seat as the calm down corner, complete with a small basket of soft, squeezable balls and a picture book about feelings. Zhang Wei stood beside him, surveying the chart. For the first time, a flicker of something like hope crossed his stoic face. Marshal, Hao has a star assignment. Everyone contributes to the household, Su Qing said firmly. Even marshals. Especially marshals. He's responsible for monster checks. It's a critical role. Just then, two small, messy heads peeked around the corner. Feng Ling and Feng Jie stared at the chart. They couldn't read all of it, but they could see their names, and they could see the stars. What is that? Feng Ling asked, her voice suspicious but curious. It's our team chart, Su Qing said, kneeling down to their level. He pointed to their names. See? This is you, Ling, and this is you, Jie. Every time you do a job, you get a star. When you get 5 stars, you get a prize. What kind of prize? Feng Jie asked, his grip on Skull Crusher loosening slightly. Su Qing smiled. That's a surprise. But first things first. It's almost lunchtime. And for lunch, we're going to have a very important mission. The twins leaned in, despite themselves. A mission. A super secret, very important taste testing mission. Su Qing whispered conspiratorially. We're going to try broccoli. He waited for the explosion. It didn't come. They just looked at each other, then back at him, their little faces a battlefield of suspicion and intrigue. It wasn't a victory, but it was a start. Chapter 3. The Broccoli Revolution. Feng Hao stood in the doorway of his own dining room and felt like he had stepped into an alternate dimension. He had spent the last 3 days at the Strategic Command, dealing with a border dispute that threatened to erupt into open conflict. It had been tense, exhausting, and exactly the kind of high-stakes environment he was built for. He had deliberately buried himself in work, partly because the situation demanded it, and partly because it kept him from thinking about the Omega he'd left convalescing in his home. The Omega he was supposed to divorce. The Omega he was fairly certain was some kind of spy or manipulator, given his sudden personality shift and bizarre behavior, according to Zhang Wei's confused daily reports. Master Su has requisitioned a whiteboard, sir. Master Su has organized the pantry by food group, sir. Master Su has attempted to engage the young masters in a vegetable taste testing mission, sir. It was nonsense. It had to be a ruse. Any day now, the real Su Qing would reveal himself, and the neglect and cruelty would begin anew. Feng Hao had braced himself for it. He had prepared his arguments for the divorce proceedings. He had mentally rehearsed the cold, final words he would use to banish this man from their lives forever. He had not braced himself for this. The living room, which usually resembled a war zone after a particularly brutal skirmish, was tidy. Not just picked up, but organized. Toys were in bins labeled building, weapons, practice, and soft things. The blanket fort had been transformed into a reading nook, with cushions, and a small shelf of books. A large, colorful chart dominated one wall. But that wasn't what stopped him cold. It was the dining room. Feng Ling and Feng Jie were sitting at the table. Not on their knees, not bouncing in their chairs, not threatening each other with cutlery. Sitting, quietly. Their faces were clean. Their hands were folded on the table in front of them. And on their plates, beside a piece of steamed fish and some rice, were small, green trees of broccoli. They weren't eating it with joy. Feng Ling was glaring at it, as if it had personally offended her ancestors. Feng Jie was poking his with a fork, his expression one of deep philosophical doubt. But they weren't throwing it. They weren't screaming. They weren't trying to feed it to the household's small, terrified cleaning robot. And then there was Su Qing. The Omega stood by the whiteboard, a marker in his hand, updating the chart. He was dressed in simple, comfortable clothes, a soft sweater that made him look small and approachable, not at all like the cold, calculating creature from Feng Hao's memories or the novel's plot. He looked up as Feng Hao entered, and his expression didn't change to fear or defiance. It was simply assessing. "Wipe your boots, Marshal," Su Qing said, his voice calm and clear. He pointed to a new mat by the door that Feng Hao hadn't noticed before. It was a cheerful shade of blue and said, "Welcome," in cartoonish letters. "I just mopped. If you're hungry, there's healthy snacks in the fridge. Dinner's in an hour." Feng Hao's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. He looked down at his boots. They were standard-issue military footwear, polished to a high shine, but they had indeed picked up some dirt from the training yards. He looked at the cheerful blue mat. He looked at Su Qing. He looked at his children, who were now watching him with the same bewildered expression they usually reserved for new, confusing phenomena. He wiped his boots. He didn't know why he did it. It was instinct, a response to a calm, firm authority that he hadn't encountered since his own mother had stopped telling him what to do. He wiped his boots thoroughly on the cheerful blue mat and stepped inside. "The children," he started, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "They're quiet. They're eating their broccoli," Su Qing said, as if that explained everything. "Or, they're considering eating their broccoli. It's a process. Ling, remember, you don't have to like it. You just have to try one bite. That's the mission." Feng Ling's scowl deepened, but she didn't argue. She picked up a single floret, held it in front of her face like a poisonous insect, and took the tiniest, most reluctant bite imaginable. She chewed. Her expression flickered from disgust to surprise to reluctant acceptance. She swallowed. "I did it," she said, looking at Su Qing. Su Qing beamed at her, and the smile transformed his entire face. It was warm, genuine, and bright. "You did it. That's amazing, Ling. Such bravery. That's definitely a star-worthy effort." He walked over and placed a star sticker, a shiny gold one, next to her name on the Try New Food section of the chart that Feng Hao hadn't noticed before. Feng Ling stared at the star, and for the first time since Feng Hao could remember, a tiny, hesitant smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Feng Jie, not to be outdone, quickly stuffed an entire floret in his mouth, chewed twice, and swallowed with a look of profound accomplishment. "Me too," he mumbled. "Wonderful, Jie." Su Qing gave him a star as well. "See, Team Feng family is on a roll." Feng Hao stood in the middle of his dining room, a stranger in his own home. He had come here ready for a fight, armed with cold words and legal documents. Instead, he had been neutralized by a chore chart and steamed vegetables. He felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation in his chest. It took him a moment to identify it, because he hadn't felt it in years. It was confusion, yes, but underneath that, there was something else, something that felt dangerously like the first flicker of hope. Su Qing turned back to him. "Are you staying for dinner, Marshal? If you are, you'll need to wash your hands. The children know the routine. Hands, then table. Ling, can you show your father where we wash up now?" Feng Ling slid off her chair, her posture straightening with importance. "This way, father," she said, her voice formal, but her eyes shining with the pride of being the expert. "We have to use the special soap, the one that smells like fruit." Feng Hao, the most feared alpha in the galaxy, followed his 5-year-old daughter to the bathroom to wash his hands with fruit-scented soap. He had no idea what was happening, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure he wanted it to stop. Chapter 4. Marshall in the Calm Down Corner. The tantrum started at 7:58 p.m. It had been, by Feng Hao's estimation, the strangest evening of his life. Dinner had been peaceful, not silent. Su Qing encouraged the children to talk about their day, asking gentle questions about what they had built and which games they had played. Feng Ling had described constructing a fortress of solitude out of blocks. Feng Jie had demonstrated how Skull Crusher could defeat the bad guys with a series of enthusiastic sound effects that Su Qing listened to with serious attention. After dinner, there had been a tidy-up blitz set to a timer. The children had actually participated, racing to put their toys in the correct bins. Then came bath time, which Su Qing managed with the efficiency of a general commanding a campaign, emerging slightly damp but victorious, with 2 clean, pajama-clad children in tow. And now it was 7:58 p.m., almost story time, almost bedtime, and Feng Ling, who had been a model of cooperation all evening, suddenly erupted. "I don't want to go to bed," she shrieked, her small face turning red. She grabbed a pillow from the couch and hurled it across the room. It bounced off a lamp. "I want to stay awake. I want to fight. I want Thunderfang." Feng Hao tensed, rising from the armchair where he'd been pretending to read a report. This was the moment, the nightly explosion. In the past, it would lead to a screaming match, then tears, then him eventually giving in just to make it stop because he had no idea what else to do. He had once let them stay up until midnight just to avoid this scene. He took a step forward, his voice hardening into his command tone. "Feng Ling." But Su Qing was already moving. He didn't yell. He didn't look angry. He walked calmly over to the raging child, knelt down to her level, and simply waited. Feng Ling, mid-shriek, faltered. She wasn't used to calm. She was used to yelling back, to cold indifference, to being removed from the room by force. "It's okay to be angry, Ling," Su Qing said, his voice low and steady. "Bedtime is hard, but it's time for our routine. What do we do when we have big feelings?" Feng Ling's lower lip trembled. The anger was still there, but confusion was starting to win. I don't know. Yes, you do. We practiced. We go to the calm down corner. Come on." He held out his hand. She stared at it. Then, with a monumental effort that was visible on her small face, she took it. Su Qing led her to the cushioned window seat. He sat down, and she climbed into his lap, still sniffling, her little body rigid with residual tension. He didn't talk. He just held her, his hand rubbing slow circles on her back. Feng Jie watched from the doorway of the playroom, his thumb creeping towards his mouth before he caught himself and shoved his hand in his pocket. He looked confused, too, and Feng Hao watched from the hallway, hidden in the shadows. He watched as the seconds ticked by. 1 minute. 2. The rigid line of Feng Ling's back slowly softened. Her breathing, which had been ragged and loud, evened out. The sniffles stopped. After what felt like a small eternity, she spoke, her voice small. "I'm sorry I threw the pillow." "Thank you for apologizing," Su Qing said gently. "That was very mature. Do you know why you were so upset?" "I was scared," she whispered, so quietly Feng Hao had a strain to hear. "Of the dark. Sometimes I have bad dreams." Feng Hao's heart clenched. He hadn't known that. He had never asked. He had been so focused on the external threats, the border disputes, the political machinations, that he had completely missed the internal battles his own child was fighting. "Ah," Su Qing said, as if she'd just told him she was scared of spiders. "A normal, manageable thing. That makes perfect sense. The dark can be tricky. That's why we have the monster check. That's your father's very important job. He checks for monsters every night, so you know it's safe." Feng Ling sniffled. He does. It's on the chart. It's his most important task." Su Qing looked up, and his eyes found Feng Hao in the shadows with unerring accuracy. "Isn't that right, Marshall?" Feng Hao stepped into the light. He felt awkward, oversized, completely out of his depth. But his daughter was looking at him with those big gray eyes, still wet with tears, and there was a new emotion in them. Hope. Hope that her father could protect her from the monsters. He He walked over and, feeling absurdly self-conscious, knelt beside the window seat. "Of course I do," he said, his voice coming out softer than he'd intended. "I check every night. Under the bed, in the closet, behind the curtains. No monsters allowed." Feng Ling considered this. What if they're very sneaky monsters? "Then I'll be a very sneaky marshal," Feng Hao said, and was rewarded with the tiniest giggle. 10 minutes later, after a thorough monster check that involved Feng Hao crawling under the bed, his uniform be damned, and Feng Jia helpfully pointing out potential monster hiding spots, both children were tucked in. Su Qing read a short, calming story about a bunny who learned to love his own burrow. As they finally left the room, the door clicking softly shut behind them, Feng Hao stood in the hallway, staring at Su Qing. The Omega looked tired but satisfied. "How'd you do that?" Feng Hao asked, his voice rough with an emotion he couldn't name. Su Qing shrugged. "I listened. I didn't fight the feeling, I acknowledged it. And then I gave her a solution. It's not complicated. It looks complicated. It's just routine. Children thrive on routine. It makes them feel safe." Su Qing yawned, covering his mouth with his hand. "I'm going to make some tea. Would you like some?" Feng Hao nodded, not trusting his voice. As he followed Su Qing to the kitchen, he realized that for the first time in 5 years, he wasn't dreading tomorrow. He was almost looking forward to it. Chapter 5, Storytime Protocol. The days began to blur into a strange, new rhythm. Feng Hao found himself coming home earlier. The border dispute had been resolved with his usual efficiency, but even when it was ongoing, he discovered that his subordinates were perfectly capable of handling things without his constant presence. The universe, it seemed, would not collapse if the marshal left the office before midnight. He told himself it was because he needed to monitor the Omega, to ensure this wasn't some elaborate long con, to protect his children. But the truth, which he carefully didn't examine, was that he wanted to be there. He wanted to see Feng Jie's face light up when he successfully completed a chore and earned a star. He wanted to hear Feng Ling's serious commentary during their evening meals. He wanted to watch Su Qing move through the house, a calm center in the midst of what had once been chaos. This Storytime Protocol, as Su Qing had jokingly named it, became the sacred heart of their evening. At exactly 7 o'clock, the twins would finish their baths, brush their teeth without being reminded, mostly, and race to the reading nook, the converted blanket fort, now equipped with a small bookshelf and piles of soft cushions. They would argue gently over who got to sit on which side of Su Qing, and then they would settle in, their fierce alpha energy finally banked, waiting. Su Qing was a gifted reader. He didn't just read the words, he became the story. His voice shifted for different characters. He did sound effects. He paused at cliffhangers, making the twins gasp and beg for just one more page. Feng Hao found himself lingering in the doorway, pretending to review reports on his datapad, but really listening. He had never been read to as a child. His own father, a stern military man, had believed in self-reliance and tactical manuals, not fairy tales. He was discovering, at the age of 35, what he had missed. One night, the story was about a lonely giant who learned to make friends by being kind. Su Qing's voice was soft and warm in the dim light of the reading nook, and the giant realized that the biggest heart was better than the biggest castle. The end. Feng Ling sighed, a contented little sound. "Baba, will you always read to us?" "Always," Su Qing promised, tucking the blanket around her. "As long as you want me to." Feng Jia, already half asleep, mumbled, "Baba is the best." Feng Hao watched Su Qing's expression soften, watched him press a gentle kiss to each child's forehead. A strange ache bloomed in his chest. It was unfamiliar, almost painful. He realized with a start that it was longing. He quietly retreated to his study before Su Qing could catch him hovering. He sat at his desk, surrounded by the tools of his trade, tactical displays, communication arrays, reports from across the galaxy, and felt, for the first time, that they were just things. Cold, lifeless things. The warmth was in the reading nook. Later that night, there was a soft knock on his study door. "Come in." Su Qing entered, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He set one on the desk in front of Feng Hao. "You look like you could use this. It's chamomile." Good for winding down. Feng Hao wrapped his hands around the warm mug. Thank you. Su Qing leaned against the edge of the desk, looking around the study. This is where you spend all your time, isn't it? It's where I work. You work too much. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the same calm authority Su Qing used to tell the twins it was time for a nap. The children miss you. They ask about you during the day. They do. Feng Hao was genuinely surprised. Ling wanted to know if you'd caught any bad guys today. Jie wanted to show you his new block tower. They want your attention. Marshall. They want their father. Feng Hao was silent for a long moment. I don't know how to be that, he admitted, the words dragged from somewhere deep inside him. I know how to be a soldier, a commander. I don't know how to be this. Su Qing looked at him, and there was no judgment in his eyes. Just that same gentle, assessing patience he used with the children. It's like anything else. You learn. You practice. You make mistakes and try again. He gestured vaguely towards the door. Tomorrow, you're on bedtime duty. Full story time. No data pad. Feng Hao blinked. I am. You are. I'll supervise. But you're doing the voices. Feng Hao, who had faced down enemy fleets and political assassins without flinching, felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. The voices, Thunder Fong and Skull Crusher, have very distinct personalities, apparently. You'll need to do justice to their dramatic monologues during the adventures of the Brave Knights chapter. Su Qing's lips twitched. Don't worry. I have faith in you. He picked up his mug and left, leaving Feng Hao alone with his chamomile tea and a terror far greater than any battlefield had ever inspired. But underneath the terror, there was something else. A flicker of warmth. A feeling of being included. Of being needed. He took a sip of the tea. It was sweet and calming. Maybe, he thought, he could learn to be that after all. Chapter 6. A Report and a Realization. The summons from the twins' preschool came on a Tuesday morning. Feng Hao was in the middle of a strategy meeting when his personal communicator buzzed with an urgent message from the Little Stars Early Learning Academy. His blood ran cold. This was it. The call he'd been dreading for years. The one that meant his children had finally done something so terrible they were being expelled. He excused himself abruptly, ignoring the startled looks from his junior officers, and took the call in the corridor. Marshal Feng, the voice on the other end, said, and it was a woman's voice, calm and professional. This is Principal Lin from Little Stars. I was hoping you could come in for a conference regarding Feng Ling and Feng Jie. Is it that bad? Feng Hao asked, his voice tight. There was a pause. I think it would be best if you saw for yourself, Marshal. Feng Hao flew to the preschool faster than regulations permitted. He arrived in under 10 minutes, his heart pounding, prepared to apologize, to negotiate, to do whatever it took to salvage the situation. He was met at the entrance by Principal Lin, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, who led him not to a disciplinary office, but to the classroom observation window. Inside, his children were painting. Feng Ling was at an easel, her small brow furrowed in concentration as she mixed colors on a palette. Feng Jie sat at a table, carefully gluing macaroni onto a piece of construction paper. They weren't fighting. They weren't biting. They weren't terrorizing the other children. They were just creating. Principal Lin smiled. I wanted you to see this, Marshall. The transformation in your children over the past few weeks has been remarkable. I don't understand, Feng Hao said, staring at the scene. They've always struggled here. They have. But recently, they've started using words to express their feelings instead of actions. Feng Ling helped another child who was upset find the calm-down corner we've now implemented thanks to her suggestion. Feng Jie shared his snack with a classmate who forgot his. She handed Feng Hao a piece of paper. This is what I really wanted to show you. It was a drawing. A child's crayon drawing, crude but clear. There were 4 stick figures. One was tall, with a sword and a stern expression drawn as a straight line for a mouth. That was him, Feng Hao realized. 2 were smaller, with messy hair and wild smiles, the twins. And in the center, slightly larger than the others, was a figure with a bright yellow triangle on its head. A crown. Principal Lin pointed to it. Ling says this is them, you, and their Baba, She said he wears a crown because he's the boss of the house. She told us, very seriously, that he taught them to use their big boy words instead of growling. Feng Hao stared at the drawing. The yellow crown, the central position, the boss of the house. His chest felt tight. The Omega he had been ready to divorce. The man he had suspected of being a spy or a manipulator was the king of his children's world. He had given them words. He had given them calm. He had given them a home. What else did they say? He asked, his voice rough. Principal Lin's smile widened. They talk about him constantly. About story time and the chore chart and the special snacks he makes. About how he helps father be less scary. She paused. Whoever this person is, Marshall, he's done more for your children in a few weeks than years of therapy could have accomplished. You're very lucky. Lucky. Feng Hao had never considered himself lucky. He was strategic. He was powerful. He was feared. But lucky? That was a word for other people. He looked at the drawing again, at the small, crowned figure at its heart. Su Qing, his Omega, his children's Baba. For the first time, he allowed himself to really see him. Not as a problem to be solved or a variable to be managed, but as a person. A person who had walked into a hostile, broken home and, with nothing but patience and a whiteboard, had begun to heal it. He carefully folded the drawing and placed it in the inside pocket of his uniform, right over his heart. He had a lot to think about. Chapter 7. The Imperial Invitation. The invitation arrived on gold embossed paper, delivered by a drone with the imperial crest. It was addressed to Marshal Feng Hao and his consort, Su Qing, requesting their presence at a formal tea hosted by the Empress herself. Feng Hao read it 3 times, his expression darkening with each pass. This is a trap, he said, handing the invitation to Su Qing. Su Qing, who was sitting at the kitchen table helping the twins with a puzzle, took it and read it calmly. A trap? For what? For you. The Empress is an old acquaintance. She's also a notorious gossip and a traditionalist. She never approved of our original marriage. It was a political arrangement, and she thought an Omega from your background was beneath the Feng family. She'll be looking for any excuse to confirm her biases. Su Qing looked at the invitation, then back at the puzzle piece in his hand. So she wants to meet the notorious, vicious mother and watch me fail in front of the entire imperial court. Essentially, yes. Su Qing thought for a moment. Then he shrugged. Okay. Feng Hao stared. Okay. That's it. You're not worried? Marshall, I've faced a room full of 3-year-olds on a sugar high after a birthday party. I've mediated disputes over a single blue crayon that turned into international incidents. I've dealt with parents who genuinely believe their child was the reincarnation of an ancient warlord and should be addressed as such. Su Qing fit a puzzle piece into place with a satisfying click. A few judgmental nobles with fancy teacups don't scare me. The day of the tea arrived, and Su Qing dressed in simple, elegant robes of pale blue silk. He refused the elaborate jewelry and heavy makeup the household stylist tried to foist on him. I'm going as myself, he said firmly, not as a performance. The imperial palace was everything Su Qing had imagined. Vast, gilded, and oppressively formal. The tea was held in a pavilion overlooking an artificial lake, with dozens of nobles in their finest attire sipping from porcelain cups and eyeing each other with barely concealed malice. The Empress was a striking woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. She greeted Feng Hao warmly, then turned her assessing gaze on Su Qing. So, she said, her voice honeyed but sharp underneath, you are the famous Su Qing. We've heard such interesting things about your household. All of them true, I'm sure, your Imperial Majesty. Su Qing replied with a slight bow, his tone perfectly neutral. The tea proceeded. Noble children, dressed in miniature versions of their parents' finery, were paraded before the Empress, demonstrating their accomplishments, reciting poetry, playing instruments, performing complex mathematical calculations in their heads. Each performance was met with polite applause and whispered comparisons. Su Qing watched it all with a teacher's eye. He saw the tension in the children's shoulders, the desperate need for approval in their eyes, the way their parents' smiles sharpened with each mistake. It was a pressure cooker disguised as a garden party. Then a commotion. One of the younger noble children, a boy of about 4, tripped while carrying his cup and spilled tea all over his embroidered tunic. He burst into tears, and his mother's face went pale with horror and embarrassment. "Control yourself," the mother hissed, grabbing the child's arm. "You're making a scene." The child only cried harder. Su-Ching moved before he thought about it. He knelt beside the sobbing boy, his movements calm and unhurried. "Hey there," he said softly. "That was a big spill. Are you okay? Did you get burned?" The boy shook his head, still crying. "And my clothes. Mama is mad. Accidents happen," Su-Ching said. "That's what clothes are for, right? To protect us from spills. They did a good job. Look, your hand is fine." He gently took the boy's hand and showed him. "Now let's take some deep breaths. Can you breathe with me? In and out, in and out." The boy's sobs slowly quieted as he followed Su-Ching's lead. Around them, the pavilion had gone silent. Every noble was watching. Su-Ching looked up at the mother, his expression kind but firm. "He's had a scare. He might need a hug and a quiet place for a few minutes." Children's feelings are big, even over small things. The mother, flustered, could only nod. Su-Ching helped the boy to his feet and guided him toward his mother, then calmly returned to his seat beside Feng Hao, as if he'd merely adjusted a napkin. The Empress was watching him with new eyes. The sharpness was still there, but underneath it, there was something else. "Respect. Marshal Feng," she said slowly, "your consort has a remarkable way with children." Feng Hao, who had been watching Su-Ching with an expression of naked wonder, managed to nod. "He does, Your Imperial Majesty. He's taught me a great deal." Later, as they were leaving, Feng Jie tugged on Su-Ching's sleeve. "Baba, that boy was sad. Did you help him?" "I did, little one. Like you help us, just like I help you." Feng Jie nodded seriously. "Good. Everyone should have a Baba like you." Su-Ching felt his eyes sting slightly. He looked up and met Feng Hao's gaze. The marshal was looking at him with an expression Su-Ching couldn't quite decipher. It was warm. It was soft. It was something. The trap had failed, but something else had succeeded. Chapter 8. The New Routine. 6 months later, the Feng family manor was almost unrecognizable. Not the building itself. That remained the same imposing fortress of dark stone. But the atmosphere, the feeling of the place, had transformed completely. It was warm now, lived in, happy. The chore chart still hung in the living room, but it had been joined by others. A height chart by the kitchen door, covered in pencil marks documenting the twins' rapid growth. A kindness calendar where family members could record when someone did something nice. And a rotating display of the twins' artwork, currently featuring a rather abstract rendering of the family that Su-Ching had proudly hung in a place of honor. The Saturday morning pancake duty had become a sacred ritual. Feng Hao, who had never cooked anything more complicated than military rations in his life, had become proficient at flipping pancakes, even attempting shapes, though his bunny pancakes looked more like lumpy potatoes with ears. The twins didn't care. They cheered every single one. Monster checks were still his domain, and he took the responsibility seriously. He had even developed a narrative. Some nights he was a stealth monster hunter, others a diplomat negotiating peace with the closet creatures. The children's bad dreams had become rare, and when they did occur, there was always a calm, patient presence to soothe them back to sleep. On this particular Saturday, Su-Ching was helping Feng Jie sound out words in a picture book about a brave little spaceship. Feng Ling was at the table, carefully drawing a picture of the family with their new set of washable markers, a vast improvement over the permanent kind she'd found in her father's study last month. "Baba," Feng Jie said, frowning at the page. "What's this word?" Su-Ching leaned over. "That's adventure. Can you sound it out?" "Adventure." "Adventure. Adventure." Feng Jie beamed. "The spaceship is going on an adventure." "That's right. Just like us." Feng Hao appeared in the doorway, holding a pair of muddy boots. He looked at Su-Ching, then at the boots, then back at Su-Ching. "The rule," he said, with the air of a man reciting a hard-learned lesson, "is that boots get wiped on the mat." "I forgot." Su-Ching looked at him, one eyebrow raised. And Feng Hao sighed. but his eyes were warm. And I'm sorry. I'll clean them and put them away. Thank you, Marshall. Feng Hao didn't move. He stood there, holding the boots, watching the scene in front of him. His son, curled against his omega, learning to read. His daughter, drawing their family with careful, loving strokes. His home, filled with warmth and quiet purpose. Ching Ching, he said, and the nickname slipped out before he could stop it. Su Qing looked up. Yes. Feng Hao crossed the room and knelt beside them. He reached out, hesitating for just a moment, then placed his hand gently on Su Qing's. Thank you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. For all of this. For them. For me. Su Qing looked at their joined hands, then up into Feng Hao's gray eyes. The coldness was gone. In its place was something open, vulnerable, and achingly sincere. You're welcome, Su Qing said softly. But you did this too, you know. You showed up. You learned. You became their father. I had a good teacher. Feng Ling, not wanting to be left out, climbed off her chair and wedged herself between them. Are we having a family hug? She demanded. We are now, Su Qing said, laughing, and pulled her in. Feng Jie abandoned his book and launched himself into the pile. Family hug. Feng Hao, the most powerful alpha in the galaxy, the feared marshal of the Imperial forces, found himself in a tangle of arms and legs and small, warm bodies, his Omega's hand still in his children's laughter in his ears. He thought of the cold, empty house this had been, the silent meals, the screaming matches, the loneliness, and he thought of this, the chaos, the noise, the sticky fingers and the mismatched pancakes and the muddy boots by the door. He smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners. Family hug, he agreed, and held on. Later that evening, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Su Qing stood in the kitchen, making his nightly cup of chamomile tea. Feng Hao appeared behind him, wrapping his arms around his waist and resting his chin on his shoulder. The Empress sent another invitation. Feng Hao murmured, Another tea. Su Qing groaned. Not another one. This one's different. She wants your advice on the Imperial Nursery. Apparently, the young princes have been difficult. Su Qing turned in his arms, surprised. She wants my advice? She wants the kindergarten marshal. Feng Hao pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. The whole empire is going to want your advice soon. You've tamed the most feral alpha in the galaxy and his terrifying children. You're a legend. Su Qing laughed, the sound warm and bright in the quiet kitchen. I didn't tame anyone. I just gave you all a routine. You gave us a home. Feng Hao's voice was soft, serious. You gave us a family. Su Qing looked at him, at this man who had once glared at him like an enemy, who now looked at him like he was the most precious thing in the universe. He thought of the strange, unlucky transmigration that had brought him here. The feral children who had become his. The cold marshal who had become this. He didn't feel unlucky anymore. Well, he said, reaching up to cup Feng Hao's face in his hands, since we're a family, and this is our home, I think it's time for a new routine. Feng Hao raised an eyebrow. Oh, what kind of routine? Kiss before tea, Su Qing said, and pulled him down. Outside, the stars shone over the Feng family manor. Inside, the chaos was warm, the love was real, and the routine was finally perfectly complete.